This show is sponsored by ExpressVPN. Stop putting your online data at risk. Get protected at expressvpn.com/yang.
We live in a time spent economy. Things are competing for your time. And you can always get more money, but you can't get more time. So time is the finite resource that we all share. And it's the ultimate neutral, flat leveling playing field that we all have to operate on. And if you have companies competing for that, you're going to end up with these problems. We're the resource that is being strip mined into our cognition. And that means that we're worth more if we're addicted, distracted, outraged, narcissistic, attention-seeking, polarized, and disinformed than if we're a thriving citizen or a healthy, growing child who's living their lives in the way that we want. And I think this speaks to some of your work, Andrew, because it's about dignity. It's about, are we the product where we're just a cog in the economy, or do we fundamentally have dignity? And can we have a system that treats each of us with a kind of sacred dignity that it should work that way?
Yeah, it's about, do we work for the economy or does the economy work for us? Are we worth more outrage than calm? It's like, well, maybe I'd still prefer to be calm, even if I'm worth more outraged. We have to see to it that we're not all just instruments of profit and revenue maximization, because it turns out maximizing our profitability is really bad for us.
We're live. Welcome back, Andrew. Recording this on Thursday morning. You guys are getting this on your Monday. Andrew just had a late night after the VP debate. It won't be timely when you guys hear this, but unless something breaks over the weekend, we'll hop in. But Andrew, just quick vice presidential debate thoughts. How do you think it went from your perspective in the studio?
I thought that it was a great night for Kamala and the Dems because you didn't have some race changing moment, which really was the mission. If you look up where things are trending very, very strongly towards Joe and Kamala, and so you just didn't want to do anything to change that. Right now, the news that's come out today is whether or not, and by Monday, who knows, whether there'll be a next debate where the debate commissions have come out and said that, hey, it should be virtual. So they're suggesting that it's going to be virtual from the same building. Like they're going to stick them in studios in the same concert hall in Miami. And then Trump immediately said, I'm not doing virtual. And so that's where it is. So there might not be a next debate. And then when I posted that story saying like, hey, not unsure what the next debate looks like, someone immediately responded to my thread. We know that's not why Trump is declining. It was like someone suggested that he might still be suffering some ill effects. So regardless of what you think, the catalyst, I take everything at face value, where like I don't think Joe wants to debate someone who has COVID, which makes sense. I mean, Joe's in a high risk population, and there are a lot of strange contacts that are happening backstage where like Trump would come in with, a massive coterie of people into the building. Like Joe has a massive coterie of of people. So like it's very hard to control for everything. So Joe's like, hey, don't want to debate Trump if he's got COVID, and doctors say this is not a good idea.
So the next debate is scheduled for the 15th. That's this Thursday, guys. I agree with you. I don't think it's fair to subject one candidate to COVID. You know what I'm saying? I don't think it's a fair thing. You have to debate that person that has pandemic level contagiousness. So virtual makes sense. Trump might, and also if Trump is sick, I think it's also fair to reschedule. Like, the human element of this, like, whether it's his fault or not.
That would be a fine place to land, because then doctors could then be 100% confident that Trump is non-contagious, and just delay it. That, like, a lot of Americans think that's a good idea. I do not know how this is going to play out, but it's none of this is good for Trump, because they need a game changer. And all of the game changers are getting are negative. It's a negative game changer again. Yeah, so
Ugh.
that's where that's like the way I'd frame the VP debate is that if you're looking for a game changer, there wasn't one.
Yeah. Um, I agree. I mean, it's kind of boring in some ways, um, which some have told me like that's what presidential debates used to always be. So maybe we're accustomed to crazy political theater now.
Well, there was an important element of it too, where like I thought Pence was a convincing messenger for another version of reality, because he had like a measured manner that made it seem like everything he was saying is reasonable,
Yes.
even if some of it was less so, and so I think that is what we're used to from these debates. But there's a quote that I thought was really important, because it spoke to a lot of people. And this is from a Politico article from the last couple of days. It said, quote, America has entered a kind of postmodern political era where the appearance of governing is just as politically powerful as actual governing, because
Mm,
most Americans now live in partisan spin bubbles that insulate them from the facts on the ground.
mm-hmm.
And so at this point, you have the parties presenting their own versions of reality, and then we just argue it's like, hey, I think that version of reality is real. No, I
We
think this
feed it.
version of reality is real, and that's disastrous. It's like you have to have some objective reality that we can all look at and say, yeah, you did a terrible job, you did a great job. Instead, I'm just being like, no, I did a great job, and then it's gonna get worse and worse because you have the partisanship shooting up because of the fact that people are getting news from different sources and social media, which we're going to talk about with Tristan Harris a little bit later. And then you have the eventual proliferation of deepfakes, which
Right.
is going to make versions of reality all the more individual and powerful. So the fact that we have people debating and not actually confronting facts, it's like the moderator almost should be able to just lay down the law and be like, look, here's some facts, like, please, it's like
Dispute
do
them
not,
or whatever.
yeah, don't dispute
Or
them. It's like,
talk.
let's
Yeah.
just have like a factual convo. And right now that's not it's a very tall order for any moderator, because like Pence and Kamala, if you're a pro, you just really just go towards whatever version of reality you're trying to present.
Yeah. So that was actually what I wanted to ask you. I thought it'd be interesting. So, and it relates to what you were talking about with Tristan Harris, who's our guest on this show today. The bubble effect of these debates. So I follow a lot of conservative accounts, and then of course a whole bunch of liberal accounts to try to get the perspectives, and that gives me some extremes. I don't love it, but it's the best I try to do. The liberals are saying Kamala dominated. They said that Pence was mansplaining, and that they loved the "excuse me, I'm speaking" line. And I do think objectively she hit him pretty hard on COVID. I thought she had some really good points there from me. But the conservatives say that Pence dominated. Like, Kamala, you're entitled to your own opinion, but not entitled to your own facts. He was cool, calm, collected. He spun Trump. He was a better spinner than Trump in his own way. And I thought, from my opinion, I thought Pence was good. I didn't love what he had to say, but I thought he was a very good debater. And it reminds me of, like, I don't know if you remember Mitt Romney saying, I had binders full of women, and he meant binders full of women applicants for various positions in his companies, and the Republicans thought this was like no big deal, and the Democrats were like, this is outrageous, what an idiot. And it's like, you watch this thing and you take what you want based on what you're rooting for. And so my question for you, Andrew, is this like political fandom where you're like, I'm a Jets fan, so no matter if they're playing the Patriots, I'll always hate the Patriots, and no matter what information goes the other way? Or is it because you're in the social media bubble? Like, is it both? Like, I feel like both sides thought they won, and that probably can't be true. I don't know what you think, but it feels like fandom to me.
The evaluation of who won a debate is purely subjective. So if you lined up millions of Americans and they all say one person won, the person won. You can't be like, well, all those people are wrong. It's one reason why they show the poll after. But to your point, there's something very pervasive going on where political parties and candidates have their own codes and moral symbols and language, and you could do something that would be incredibly offensive to one camp that another camp would find totally benign. And That's gotten worse. The book The Righteous Mind, that also is tied to what Tristan talks about in his work. We talked about this a bit with Matt Jones last week, where conservatives speak along a different set of moral values, which include sanctity, loyalty, and authority at a higher level than the left, liberals and progressives. So if you say something that suggests like a particular hierarchical arrangement, conservatives would be like, sure, whatever.
Yep.
And then liberals will be like, oh, that's really offensive, and I'm mad about it.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be something we continuously struggle with, because that polarization is getting stronger.
Yep. So we're starting to get more and more passionate about democracy reform. This is my idea, Andrew. I think we change the debate format, and we may want to lobby it's called the Nonpartisan Commission on Presidential Debates, or whatever the hell it's called. It seems to me the goal of the debates should be to educate voters, right? Like that seems to be the only goal, like who's running and what do they stand for and where are they on the issues. So to me, this like 2-minute sizzle reel reality TV show back and forth theater is actually a disaster for that. So this is my idea. I think you can put it on TV, but you do long form podcast style where it's sitting down, 2 microphones. And I think you do it on topic. You say, okay, this one's on the economy and healthcare today. The only 2 things we're talking about. And you just go. And it's long form. There's no, even if there's interrupting, you have a longer period for stuff to breathe. So you actually have to have the convo. And then I think another fun twist would be letting the candidates or the parties pick the topics. Because I think it would be interesting and educational for topics that no one likes touching, like abortion or Roe v. Wade or immigration or, things that various aspects of human rights and justice and George Floyd and things like that. I think would be fascinating to actually force the candidates to take that position publicly in long form. And I think you'd see a lot of changing across parties. That's my thought. That's my idea. What do you think?
I love the idea of trying to change up the format and do things that are more asynchronous and innovative. There's an idea that I just got from Lawrence Lessig around something called deliberative polling. So here's Lawrence Lessig's argument. He says, look, right now if a pollster calls you up and says, what do you think about foreign policy? What do you think about gun safety laws and whatnot? It's like we all say something, but sometimes we don't really know that much about an issue, but we're just gonna throw down and express our opinion because that's just like how polling works. And his argument is like, look, we're not experts on any of this stuff, and we don't have that much information, and the average American is not exactly like researching foreign policy and on the daily. And so his argument was that you do is you bring together a group of people, like the network's trying to do with these undecided swing voters. You bring together a group of people that are representative of the U.S. population, but then you actually give them a lot of time and information about a particular topic, where they get points of view, they get both sides, they get and then they come out with like a judgment, and oftentimes that judgment is very, very consistent with what most of us would want, because there is like a sense of common sense that a lot of these deliberative polling bodies can generate. The problem with the current format right now is you're essentially rewarding performers, and then afterwards we're like, ooh, I like that performer, I think that performer did great, and
Performer destroyed the other performer.
Yeah, like, oh, that performer is so much better, and like that, there's something very noxious about it. In a way, it is very American in the sense that, like, I think America likes folks getting out and kind of like a 2 people enter, 1 person leaves.
We love that. Yeah,
we're into that stuff, but if the purpose is to educate people, then it's tough because you'd actually go about it differently. But I think some kind of asynchronous, long form, let things breathe, and changing up the format where it's not just competing 2 minute sound bites, because you're dealing with people who are going to become optimized for that. And like I experienced that, first time I showed up, I was like, all right, I guess we're going to talk about some stuff. And then like after one debate was like, okay, I guess now we're going to talk in 60 to 90-second modules, and like, it's
Yes.
like have your, because you could see with Kamala and Mike, because they're both I don't know Mike Pence at all, but like that they're professionals, and you saw them pivot to
They knew what they were doing. Both of them. Complete pros.
and it was, I mean, it was well done. Like, I admired it. I admired the
Yeah.
craft. But if you have people who are good at that, then your learnings are limited.
So I have two thoughts. One was when you're talking about polling, like the polls on universal basic income, like whether or not you like it or not, if you take the word government out or put it back in, like it changes drastically, right? Do you like cash payments to help the people that work in America? People are like, yes. Do you like cash payments for the government? People are like, no. Or various versions of that. So I agree with you. There's a probably way to fix the polling. And then this is going to sound, it might be un-American to say this in its own, traditional sense, but we probably need to take the excitement and fun out of politics. Like, we need to shorten it up, make it less sexy, like more boring, because these problems are long and complicated. The problems are not sexy and fun, and we're putting these people out there that are, they're flashy, and their job is to be flashy. And you said this a lot on the trail. You said, if I was a CEO doing what I'm doing right now, running a company, I'd be the worst CEO ever. And you watch those CEOs flame out all the time because they're all about themselves, and they're all about the limelight and all about the next hot thing. And it's not effective to run an organization.
Yeah, no, we should just be like, if you're running for president again, you have a record and the rest of it. Like, I feel like every media organization should just be playing the stats and being like, here's where it was when you took over. Here's where it is now. Like, like, how are we doing? And to just like have but like, what are we evaluating these people on? Like, the problem right now is we're evaluating people on their performance ability, the way they make us feel, like the way that the media amplifies particular messages. And I'll be the first to say, it's like I'm more amenable to certain messages than others. I think like a lot of people are, but there's an objective reality that is decomposing around us, like we have to start holding our leaders accountable to the objective reality. There was that piece in the New York Times recently that said, America's 28th in all of these major indicators, like access to clean water and maternal health and infant mortality and life expectancy. It's like America's that'd be a slogan. It's like, America, like, we're 28. Like some of these numbers are appalling, and you can very clearly see that we've developed a political system where those numbers can keep on backsliding, and then like each camp is like, yeah, we're doing a great job, you're terrible, and being like, oh, there's an author named Philip Howard that said something that I said on the trail. He's like, the parties are playing you lose, I lose, you lose, I lose. They're just passing the ball back and forth, and meanwhile we're all losing. Like, that's really the danger. And I'm on board with like most all the Democratic like priorities and policies in terms of trying to improve education, and I think we need Medicare for all and single payer healthcare. Like, my policy prescriptions line up more with the current Democratic Party. But we've devised a system that's going to make it very hard for anyone to govern and solve problems, because that's not really how we're evaluating people.
We being the United States of America in 2016, voted for Donald not because of his business acumen. He did not run. I mean, that was part of it, but that was not what like really got vetted in the media. It was his ability to message and talk about stuff.
Here at Yang Speaks, we think your data should be yours and not someone else's. We're supporting Prop 24 in California, if you're listening to this, where we can have higher protections for your data rights. But in the meantime, if you're just doing your thing online and you don't want the tech companies and the data brokers to get a hold of every click, every like, every this and that, you can use ExpressVPN, which is something that the big companies have their people use. It's like beaming into the internet remotely using a server far away. It's like you're a spy. The spy doing whatever you do, nothing really, espionage. But hey, who knows? Maybe you are. Who the heck knows? And if you were, you might use ExpressVPN too. Why not? It's the number one rated VPN according to CNET and Wired. People that know what they're talking about say this is it. Go to expressvpn.com/yang and you can get an extra 3 months free on a 1-year package. That's expressvpn.com/yang. expressvpn.com/yang.
The president still has COVID. As of now, Thursday, October 8th, and we're recording this, there are 35 cases of COVID in the White House and growing. The new diagnosis every day. And for context, that is more new cases this week than the entire country of Taiwan, which has 23 million people and had 8 new cases. So that's what's happening in the United States right now. Now, there's a bunch of other countries. Some are not good on testing, but Taiwan is. So that data is pretty accurate. And there's information coming out of the White House. Does Rudy Giuliani have it? No one knows. How bad is Trump? No one knows. So it's actually tough to know if that 35 number is 100% accurate. This is my hot take. Get your shit together. Like, yes, on a human level, we don't want you to have COVID, but the real risk of COVID is how you spread it to others, right? Like, that is the bigger problem. And you've got other people in the orbit getting it.
Well, in case of the White House, in theory, they're doing very important work every day. And,
Yes.
I'm sure that organization's much less productive now because everyone's hiding from their boss who might have COVID and, that
Yes, we need you to lead. We need you to manage.
Yeah, it's true for their campaign too. It's one reason why I think this is going to end up being a landslide election, frankly, is that you have a losing Trump campaign that's had their chief messenger get COVID, and then your campaign manager has COVID too, so he's quarantining. Like the entire team, I'm sure, is limping around in terms of what they would need to do a few weeks before the election. You're now getting swamped on the airwaves. You're getting outspent. Aside from the fact that Trump has pulled away from some incredible controversies and scrapes before, and we're like, it's like a movie villain where you're like, you can't be sure that he's gone until he's been thrown off a cliff 10 times or whatever. So you know what I mean? Like the movie villain keeps coming back, the Terminator. Donald Trump's like the political Terminator for a lot of people. But if you look up, you got to know it's like, look, this thing's shaping up to be a landslide. If I'm the Democrats, I'm investing in edge races where you're like, what's that? We traditionally lost that place by 10 points. You might win it this time.
Seriously. Look at Iowa right now. Holy crap.
It's Iowa, it's Texas, it's South Carolina, it's Alaska, it's Montana. It just goes on and on. Like you could just Maine. I mean, I think Susan Collins is on track to lose, and so like that. There's there is a massive opportunity. Where we're actually, I think, still kind of trying to shake off the trauma of 2016 and every day since then, where everyone's like, oh no, you can't be sure we're going to beat this guy. I think right now, you have to actually get greedy and look around the map and say okay, and we just endorsed a couple of candidates today, John Hoadley and Christy Smith, who are running for Congress in Michigan and a very competitive part of California. I've been actually surprised. There are a lot of freaking red parts of California. Like they have very uphill climbs. But given the shape of this climate in 2020, do I think that a lot of Dems are going to win in places that have not been friendly to them? Heck yes. We should be freaking piling in. The wave is coming. And I would have to say this wave has been earned by the Republicans. It's like they've really done a poor job of governing over this last period of time. And I think they're going to pay a price.
They've done a number, man. And look, when you run for office, there's a bunch of different options you have for messaging, right? You have the whole, but you pick your focus, you pick your why, and you go with it. When there's a pandemic, that message gets picked for you, in my opinion. You got one. When 9/11 happened, Bush was not out there talking about lowering taxes. He was talking about, never forget, we come together, we support our first responders, like we bring this country together, whether you're Republican or Democrat, you're American first. And the message for Donald Trump when the pandemic happened was, we come together and we beat this thing. He could have kept Make America Great Again. Like, he could have actually framed this in a healthy way. He didn't. He missed it. I don't think there's another option for him. He refuses to do it.
They didn't even pass freaking a relief bill. I mean, that is just mind-boggling. It's like, let's see, I'm the sitting president. I've got control over one of the houses of Congress. Every American knows we should have a relief bill. Every economist saying like we should have a relief bill, and we can't get it done. Like that's like I mean, that stuff's unfathomable. Like I tweeted that it was fucking terrible when he announced, it's like, we're not doing this until after the election. It's like, are you like, and I tweeted that on behalf of the American people who are suffering. But if you look at it objectively, like it's Donald Trump. I saw someone saying like, look, this is him essentially like committing political suicide, where he's looking up being like, and I could take credit for bailing people out. I could send people checks. I could do this thing. It would be both the right thing to do and the politically wise thing to do, and Democrats would get on board with it, because Democrats are not some people who'd be like, let's not do this, even though we can all see it, and they're not doing it. So like, this is the kind of misgovernance that gets you out in your ear by a wide margin.
Ridiculous. He said no, and then he tweeted yes, and now he's saying no. It's a hot mess, and the market's going to shit. The Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, literally the head of the Federal Reserve, said, if we don't have a massive stimulus, we're toast. That's the problem. We go back and forth like talking heads all day and bitch about it or get fired up. But the reality is millions are suffering. The reality is your kids are going to have a tough time getting a job in this economy. The reality is we have dark years ahead. So to your point earlier, I think the Dems should go for blood. As long as they're not like, it's still seeing the ball into the glove in the states they have to win. Like, if you can flip Texas, do it. If you can flip something, like, because that's where the change is needed in the actual governing 2-3 years from now,
Yeah. This people don't like it when I do this, but whatever. I think Joe and Kamala are going to win. I think that they're
people
going
don't
to
like when you do that.
Yeah, I know.
I don't even like when you do that.
No one likes it, but whatever. I mean,
whatever.
I
It's
what
fine.
I think.
Look, you don't do things for to please people. You're an honest guy.
I just say what I think.
Yeah.
I think Dems are going to get a lot of gains. I think they're going to get the Senate. I think they're going to control all branches of the government. And here's like the major challenge is that, can we do enough so that we can actually start to reconstitute all of the broken trust and the suffering, and make it so that it's not that, okay, now we have the ball again and things just continue to get worse and everything is continuing to disintegrate. And so that to me is the real challenge at stake. I actually think this election is done. And like the question should be whether we win in places that are not Dem friendly, and whether or not we like what the size of the gains are, frankly. But the real question is, how do you govern? How do you actually solve problems? And Republicans will have a lot to say about this too, because you can still obstruct a lot, as we've seen in other times. But we need like a New Deal level reinvestment in the country, and done the right way. So it's not like, hey, we've created all these programs that you maybe don't use or trust. It's like it's one reason I'm so passionate about universal basic income or cash relief. Is like, if we get in there and we'd be like, hey, let's rebuild the country, and here's like a lifeline for you and your family, that's the kind of thing that would help us come back in a genuine way and get us all invested, and possibly even unify us and bring us together to a higher extent. That's the great hope, and the great challenge, because we have not done a great job at this for years. It's why so many people are so pissed off and disaffected. And like the thing that people have said over and over again, and to the extent some extent it was overstated. They were like, "Don't worry about Trump, worry about what comes after Trump." It's that if Joe and Kamala win and the Dems win, like I believe we will, like we have an opportunity, a window to govern and rebuild, and we have to max it out to have a chance, because a lot of the stuff that animated Donald Trump is just getting stronger, frankly. I mean, like what animated Trump is institutional distrust and dysfunction, and that's shot up during this pandemic. Like mental health problems shot up. Like the people adhering to conspiracy theories is shot up. And again, we're going to talk to Tristan about this. So the challenge that's really, to me, like I've already seen the ball into the glove in my mind, Zach, and you're like, to the point. I mean, I'm gonna work my ass off and like between now and election day and like the rest of it. But my mind's already on like, okay, like let's say we win, like what does the challenge truly look like, and can we rise to the occasion?
So I'll say this, two things. One, for those of you listen, I disagree with you that this is in the bag, and mainly not because your data and your sense, I think I fundamentally 100% agree with. It's just that, to me, never count out Donald Trump and never count out the conservatives. I think they're better, historically way better at this than the Democrats are in terms of changing the game and flipping the script and finding ways to win. I'd love to be proven wrong, and I will do everything to be proven wrong, but I don't think it's over yet. But I agree. I understand your point. The second thing is where I'm talking about is you and I are very, very aligned, which is right now, you, myself, our organization, our networks, we are doing what we can, everything we can to help Joe and Kamala win, because that is the first step to solving these problems, right? But after the election is going to be when we get back to the problem-solving piece, whether that's in the administration or outside. And that's where I think the real work is, because to your point, if Joe and Kamala get in office and we have same old, it's I think Trump is just tip of the iceberg in terms of how bad it can get, and I think that's kind of what you're saying. So folks, vote. Look at me. I voted. You can see this. I went and I got a mail-in ballot. It's very safe. It's got my name on it. Fantastic. Or name on the envelope, not the actual ballot, because that's private, but I just showed it to you. But please vote. That's how we actually win. When you guys get out there and vote, convince your friends to vote. Vote any way you can. They're all legit. Don't buy the fake narrative. We are generally good, particularly at mail-in voting in this country. So please vote. All right, let's Andrew, let's introduce Tristan, man. This is going to be this conversation. This is the topic. This is it.
Yeah, you know him. I hope you know him. So, okay. If you have not seen the Netflix documentary, The Social Dilemma, please do see it.
Watch it.
Our guest,
Watch it.
Tristan Harris, is one of the main reasons that documentary exists. You've hopefully heard of him. He's a design ethicist at Google after he wrote an impassioned message about how what they're doing there like touches millions and billions of people, and they're not actually struggling with like what their design choices will mean. And then he's taken that work to social media platforms, the choices that we're making there, the fact it's corroding our democracy, our mental health. So he started an organization called Time Well Spent to talk about how we can use technology better. And the Center for Humane Technology. I said on the trail all the time that we need a new Department of the Attention Economy, and I'm going to ask Tristan to head it because Tristan's one of the foremost thinkers about what technology is doing to us and our minds. I also quoted him on the trail all the time when he said that we have some of the smartest people in the country turning supercomputers into slot machines and dopamine delivery devices for us and our kids. And he's spot on about everything. He's such an important figure. The world would be a darker place if we didn't have someone like Tristan fighting for humanity. I'm thrilled to have him on. Yeah, he is a source of light and knowledge Please do watch the documentary. I'll probably talk about over and over again. But Social Dilemma. Tristan Harris, the founder of the Center for Humane Technology.
Andrew, did you see Facebook's response to the documentary?
I did not. What do they say?
I'm gonna send you this shit. It's so bad. It's like they have like 7 reasons why the social dilemma is bullshit. And the first one's like addiction. Like Facebook builds a product to create value, not to be addictive. 2, you are not the product. Facebook is funded by advertising so that it remains free for the people. What the fuck? It's outrageous. This thing is so... My skin crawled because I don't think how you could watch a social dilemma and then hear Facebook's response. Like Facebook's appropriate response, like, hey, like the goal of Facebook to do this, we've gotten a little away from it, we're getting better, right? Like that to me would have been a better response. This is like a straight up denial. Whew. But yeah, Tristan Harris is the only, I mean, frankly, Yang, you talked about this on the trail, but he brought this with the documentary he's been working on. He brought this to light. He's like picking up the rock when all the bugs are scattering. Like this documentary should have ripple effects for the tide is turning, if you will, in DC in public opinion. And he's a saint for doing it, frankly, because I don't think it's necessarily monetary helpful in his career. I think he becomes a bad guy in a lot of ways. So pumped to have him, Tristan Harris.
All right, holiday season is around the corner, which means given that maybe you're not visiting everyone that you'd like to visit, you might be mailing them stuff. Before you might go to the post office, but now you really should check out stamps.com. We use stamps.com all the time on the campaign. It's like having a post office on your computer, and now it includes UPS. So it's like USPS and UPS all in one on your computer. You can print everything you need, just stick it on the box. No need to wait in line. It is glorious. And there's no risk. With my promo code YANG, you get a special offer that includes a 4-week trial plus free postage and a digital scale. The scale is not that big. You can't weigh yourself, but you can weigh packages. And that's really all the scale's for. So go to stamps.com, click on the microphone at the top of the homepage and type in YANG. That's stamps.com, enter YANG.
So I just voted, and in order to, like a mail-in vote, and in order to do a mail-in vote, you actually have to provide your own stamp. So just use stamps.com to get my stamp. So if you're voting, you may want this, because I don't know how many of you have stamps lying around your house or apartment or wherever you are. So stamps.com.
Stamps.com, enabling democracy since 2020. It is my pleasure and thrill to welcome to Yang Speaks someone I consider a friend, but more than that, he's a hero of mine in terms of explaining to folks how technology is hurting us as well as helping us. Tristan Harris, welcome to Yang Speaks. Tristan.
Andrew, thank you so much for having me. It's great to see you again.
I'm going to keep singing your praises for a minute, Tristan. I'm going to keep singing your praises. Hi, God. Design ethicist, founder of the Center for Humane Technology. You might have seen him in what, in my mind, was a groundbreaking and award-winning documentary, The Social Dilemma, that's on Netflix. One of the most human people on earth. All right. Sorry, I'm going to do your introduction justice.
It's really great to be here, Andrew. I've always tell people, hopefully maybe we'll mention how we met, but it's been just amazing to see your really authentic rise from, what I thought were humble beginnings when we first met at the TED conference in 2017. And I'm just blown away by what you've been able to accomplish. And anyway, we'll get into all of it, but I'm just as happy to be here with you.
Thank you. You and I met several times over the last number of years. There was TED, and then there was an event in New York where Ariana Huffington was there, and we reconnected. And then there was a house party in the Bay Area where I was like, hey, it's just out of the kitchen. And they're like... So it certainly felt like we were going to be working together in various ways. And there are so few people who really, there's only one of you. And I want For people who don't know you that well, and I know you must be a little bit tired of relating your background and how you came to this cause and this organization, but you became kind of a singular a voice of reason in Silicon Valley a number of years ago when you worked at Google.
Yeah, I mean, so my background for those who don't know, I actually, just to tell a slightly different story that I think relates to your experience, I used to be into tech entrepreneurship. I had a small startup company. I was CEO of that company. It was called Apture. It was sort of a failure after 5 years. It got talent acquired by Google. But I know the startup game. I know the thing that people who are building engaging attention-driven applications face when you're an entrepreneur. And my friends in college, I studied computer science at Stanford and was part of a lab called the Stanford Persuasive Technology Lab. I studied there with the founders of Instagram, especially Mike Krieger, who I was project partners with actually. And we originally were thinking of how we could apply persuasive technology for good, which is, we had this professor, BJ Fogg, who would teach, how do we apply the principles of persuasion to technology? And could we use it to help people live their dreams, live their goals? So work out more, floss more, whatever it would be. And Mike and I, the founder of Instagram, built something called Send the Sunshine, which was the idea that if you knew two phones and you knew one of them was in a zip code that, based on the weather forecast, had 5 days in a row of bad weather, the other phone was in a good zip code with good weather, it would send a text message to the person with good weather to say, hey, your friend Tristan has bad weather. Do you want to send him some sunshine? So this was using persuasive technology to orchestrate more, love or compassion or kindness for other people. And so we saw those tools, but then overall, as things progressed, I saw how more and more of my really well-intentioned friends got trapped in this kind of venture capital driven viral growth, get maximum engagement, maximum time spent. And it became, as the phrase now is known, the race to the bottom of the brainstem, the race into the lizard brain, to try to get people using their products. And it was through seeing that and being at Google that I sort of said something's wrong here. And I have to say first that Google was generous in, I think, creating a space for me to do some of that research, where I became a design ethicist, thinking about how do you ethically steer and design people's attention when you're playing with some very deep-seated psychological vulnerabilities.
So you mean they didn't exactly hire you to be a design ethicist?
That's right. Yeah, I arrived at through a sort of the secondary success of this presentation that was sounding the alarm about how we were really kind of like the stewards, the moral stewards of the human collective consciousness, that 2 billion people's minds are running through the kind of wiring diagram of how we create the attention economy, through our choices. Like how does a notification work? How does a newsfeed work? How do app store payouts work? Do you get paid the more you send, teenagers to hospitals for depression, or do you get paid based on, subscription revenue, based on people feeling like they're getting value from something? So all of those mechanics were, really part of how Google was positioned to try to be a federal reserve of the attention economy, or kind of a government of the attention economy. But the critiques were obviously much larger than Google. It was really about how does this entire tech ecosystem work in the best interests of people, which is why I think it relates very much to your work. Like, how do we make these systems, these economic systems, really work for people?
Yeah, I feel like you and I are tackling related problems of humanity that we are facing right now in 2020. I want to rewind a little bit further back, just because I find you to be such a fascinating figure. You grew up in the Bay Area to a single mom. Is that right?
Yeah. Grew up in San Francisco and went to a small school for working parents. I grew up just with my mother, not with father. And then we went and moved up to Santa Rosa, to the countryside, to live out her dream of owning horses. And I had no one in my family who was interested in technology. I was the only one who was always on the computer and learning programming when I was about 15, and didn't anticipate anything that would be happening now, certainly.
So you're the geeky kid who's on the computer. You get into Stanford, which is not that far away, so I'm sure you're excited about it. You get there, and it sounds like you were working on technologies to try and do something positive. That BJ Fogg Persuasive Technologies class is now legendary, because it seems like half of the major tech entrepreneurs of the last generation all went through there. How was your time at Stanford, and did people have a sense even then of the magnitude of both the changes and the companies that would spring from it?
When I was there, so I was there from 2002 to 2006. And, I should say I was including with the founders of Instagram and several other of my friends who were, really optimistic. We used to meet and wonder like what would be the ways that we would apply, our computer science degrees towards social impact. That's actually, we used to gather every 3 weeks or so and sit in some hidden part of the Stanford campus and brainstorm, what those projects might look like. We supported each other. We all had really positive intentions. This is different. I didn't know the people who started Facebook, although I remember when Facebook landed on the Stanford campus when I was a sophomore in 2004. And we saw, the kind of arrival of photo tagging and the way that it sort of took over Stanford dorm room life. And that's actually what you see in the film, The Social Dilemma, is, how the features of photo tagging, which was this perfect sort of persuasive cocktail to keep people coming back to Facebook at that time, because it's basically tapping into one of the most ancient kind of deep-seated human vulnerabilities, which is social approval. Hey, there's a photo, it's of you, and someone else tagged you in this photo. Don't you want to see, obviously, if it's a good photo or not? And when they found that feature and it worked, it's like, let's dial that up like crazy and have everybody uploading photos and tagging each other all day long. And I'm sure the productivity of the entire Stanford class dropped by, 20% or something like that. But we didn't really know, obviously back then, any of this would lead to political polarization or mental health problems for kids or, shred apart, the fabric of our, information ecology and people believing in more conspiracies. These came about much later, I think, through people realizing where those incentives of maximizing engagement and attention would take us.
Well, you certainly had very positive intentions because of the nature of the company you founded out of Stanford, Apture, and you were grinding away at that. So it seems like we may have something in common where I started a company that did not work out. I feel like your company came a lot closer to get to working out, and that certainly no one bought my little company to employ us in the way that Google bought your company. So can you tell us a little bit more about your entrepreneurial arc with Apture? Because as someone who started a company myself, it was very, very hard. It sounds like you had some ups and downs too.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny, I don't talk about this that much. So Apture, just so I explain what it was, the phrase we came up with, it's like lighter fluid for sparks of curiosity. It was a service that when a publisher like The Economist or New York Times put it on their website, it would create this ability for a reader to get on-the-fly multimedia explanations about any topic. First started out as a publisher tool. So we had like the climate change blog on the New York Times and several other sites basically linking statistics or videos. So you would say, hey, I want to...
So how many of you were there? And did you get a little bit of funding out of Stanford, like when you decided to launch this thing?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was 22, I think, when we started the company. And I actually was living in Argentina, learning to dance tango. And on the evenings, working on this startup from a cafe. But we had a few Stanford friends of mine in senior year get together. We raised venture capital we raised angel investing money from a couple fathers and friends of some other friends of mine from Stanford. And we got our first deal with the Washington Post. This is back in the heyday of people asking what would the future of news and online context be. And the idea was, could we do something really different and radically new when it came to news online? In fact, it was about social impact. Like, for example, could you see the congressional voting record of every single politician while you were reading the New York Times and see the video that they gave of the speech that they gave on the House or Senate floor right there in the article without leaving the page? And we actually built that. So on the Washington Post for a few years in 2007, 2008, you could click on any Congress member and then see their voting record and videos of them on the House or Senate floor without even leaving that article. So we were really trying to create a kind of transparency and positive social impact and a reifying of what would make democracy stronger. Of course, and this is where the story turns, what happened was that publishers like The Economist or New York Times or Washington Post would ask us, okay, we thought we wanted you to help, give people these interesting features to learn about whatever they want. It ultimately, our success metric for them was, did we increase the amount of time people spent on their website? And that's when it really hit me that my personal goal, which is more of a social impact, almost aesthetic or art driven goal of can we make, democracy stronger or give people better information, was really a different thing than the business goal, which is about maximizing engagement and attention, even on news websites. And the fact that I couldn't reconcile that in my own mind, that every day I would kind of tell one story to our team of engineers. We were only about a 10-person company. We would tell one story to them of we're trying to make the world, more curious and help people learn about things. But then there would be this other side of it, which was measuring our success on how much time we were getting people to spend. And I tried to pretend for a long time that was the same thing, just like at Facebook, like we're making the world more open and connected. Yes, we are doing that, but we're also maximizing just engagement. And they seem really aligned, right? If one is happening, like I'm making the world more open and connected, then the other thing should be happening. People are spending more time. So it's easy to fool yourself into thinking that they're the same thing. And, I don't think I've actually told this story before, but it was through a set of other tech founders and I gathering for something we called Doubt Club that I decided to basically cave in and just frankly, let Google acquire the company for parts because, it was hard to admit to myself that really we weren't going to go anywhere and that this was something that we were going to be trapped in this attention game forever, and there'd be a limit to the kind of growth that we could get because we had to fight for every publisher that used our service on their website. So we started a group called Doubt Club, where several founders, realizing that when you're a tech founder, you can't really express, doubts.
It is a very isolating thing being a founder because you're there and it's like you're telling your team, hey, we're going around the corner, and to tell the investors, hey, we're going around the corner. Like there's no one, there's no founder that's going to be like, hey guys, I actually have my doubts about this. Because one of the things that happens is that any doubt you have gets amplified and magnified tenfold for like anyone around you. I'll tell you, running for president was like that too. It's like, like if the candidate starts evincing doubts, people will be like, wait a minute, I'm dedicating my career to like trying to get this person elected. What? So like you have to be freaking stoic and on top of it at all times.
Completely, right? I mean, and that's the pressure as you're talking about. I mean, in many leadership roles, there's no safe place to sort of say, man, I'm not sure if this is really the right path, or maybe this business model isn't, maybe we shouldn't exist even, Can you even think those thoughts, or are those thoughts unaffordable to you? So this group was really profound. We had several friends, and the first rule about Doubt Club is don't talk about Doubt Club because
definitely don't talk about Doubt Club.
Yeah, I mean, we had to be many of us, we knew each other's investors. And so if you're given a safe space to talk about maybe this shouldn't exist, you're not going to go off and you're going to keep that secret, obviously. So it was through that social support, though, that several of us ended up letting our companies become talent acquired. And what I mean by that really is acquired for parts. I mean, this was not a successful acquisition. And then another person in that group ended up just shutting down their organization and company. But again, I think what it really had us recognize is the internal conflicts and the kind of denial that we can face when we're sitting on top of something. You've raised millions of dollars. You've got 12 people working for you. You've got livelihoods that depend on you. Can you be really honest about when maybe the thing that got you here isn't what is really still happening, that social purpose? And that's when, I think this started to turn for me. And I think that's what's at the root of when I look at many people in the tech industry. I don't see them as evil people. I see them as trapped by a set of incentives that I think now many of them also agree are true. And this is just kind of the place we find ourselves.
Yeah, you experienced the incentives directly on two levels with Apture. Number one is how does my company grow and get paid? And that's related to how publishers grow and get paid. And that's time spent on their website so that they can sell more advertising. And then the second set of incentives is if I'm in a leadership role in this organization, then what are my imperatives? What am I allowed to express and not express? And those two things are playing out at a gargantuan, almost unthinkable scale at a place like Facebook. Because for them, instead of being like, hey, I'm going to get an extra contract from a publisher, it's like, I'm going to get tens of billions of dollars if we just keep this thing going. And then if you're a senior executive at Facebook, you're like, okay, I've got the biggest franchise in the history of the world. Some people are telling me maybe I should examine my practices. Well, let's see. I have very, very powerful incentives like pulling me this way and not really that way. So you lived it, and I think you understand it more deeply as a result.
Well, I think that's actually why Andrew, I think our message, I want to name, there's many more researchers in the community who've been studying some of these problems, whether it's Doug Rushkoff or Sophia Nobel or others who focus on different aspects of these harms. And we're really building on the work of those people. But I think the reason that when our message came around, that it really resonated with people inside the tech industry is it spoke in the vocabulary and language that they actually operate in, which is, do you have a metrics dashboard? Do you measure DAUs, daily active users? Do you measure MAUs? Do you measure engagement time spent, 7-day actives? We know the common metrics and design decisions and the kind of vocabulary that people on the inside use. So I think when we spoke, it was the first time that I think people on the inside had to come to terms with the fundamental misalignment of incentives that I think people didn't want to look at. And I just want to name that because, while I think we've been successful at that, we're building much on the insights of people who came before and have been critiquing these areas, whether it's Sherry Turkle or, more recently, Jean Twenge and Jonathan Haidt. There's lots of great people who are doing the research, and they're also in the film. But I think we've been successful because we've been speaking a language that makes it more universally understood for the masses. And that's why the film actually is so exciting, because I think having it received in 190 countries and in 30 languages, being number one in India, number one in Lebanon recently, breaking records for documentaries on Netflix, I think it's created a cultural moment, a global cultural awakening, akin to something like Inconvenient Truth or A Silent Spring, but for the toxic business models of some of the tech companies.
It's so important. I am so proud of you and whoever busted their tails trying to get that movie into the world, and Netflix for taking it up and distributing it. Thank you, Netflix.
So I messed up my shoulder because I'm learning how to golf, and I'm horrible at it. The angle I sleep at the moment is very, very important. And I'll put it this way, my old mattress would have been a disaster. But my new one has been wonderful, and that's because my new mattress is from Helix Sleep. How Helix Sleep works, guys, is you go online, you basically fill out a survey on how you sleep, and then they match you with the mattress, and they ship it to you in a couple days. And it comes in this very tightly wrapped box, easy to get into your home, and bang, pops open. Next thing you know, you have one of the most comfortable mattresses you've ever slept on. The other thing is you have a 10-year warranty, and you get to try it before you buy it in the first 100 nights. So if you don't like it, you're good. You can get off it. We've got something good for Yang Speaks listeners. Helix is offering up to $200 off all mattress orders and 2 free pillows as well for our listeners at helixsleep.com/yang. That's Helix, HELIX sleep.com/yang. You get $200 off your first mattress.
The number one best overall mattress pick of 2019 and 2020, according to GQ and Wired magazine. So can you imagine doing that article? You just sleep on a bunch of mattresses and say the best one, Helix Sleep. So you have this tough series of meetings at Doubt Club, and you say, look, I think Apture is not going to stand the test of time or grow the way I want it to. So then to get yourself acqui-hired for parts by Google, is that like an easy thing? Because, you're a hyper talented guy. I'm sure some of your engineers are hyper talented. Is it like pick up the phone? Do you have friends at Google where you were like, hey, like, let's get this conversation going? How does that work?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I had some friends who were at Google, but I didn't know any of the leadership there. Certainly, I think we were, what it was actually? I could tell you the story. Do you remember when Quora first launched?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so Adam D'Angelo, who's the CTO of Quora, had started this question and answer site, which everybody now knows is called Quora. And there was the early community of Quora adopters. And one of the first questions that I think it was Zuckerberg who asked the question on Quora, and it said, who are the most, sorry, I'm not trying to toot my own horn here. I'm just trying to give you a story of what happened. Yeah. But Zuckerberg had posted, what are the most talented companies and people that in Silicon Valley right now that most people don't appreciate? And there's obviously lots of questions lots of answers to that post. But the one that people voted up the most was actually Apture and our team. And so I think that post where we were highlighted as a uniquely talented group of people led to some conversations about acquisitions with Google. I came to know Sundar Pichai, who at the time was, he's obviously now CEO of Google, but at the time he was head of Chrome and apps. And, we started an acquisition process with a small competition. It was very challenging. I mean, actually, these things take a long time, and it was really one of the most stressful and depressing periods of my life, to be honest, because you have to admit that, you've been working for 6 years incredibly hard, and it's all just, we got eaten up by the Borg. I mean, our entire service and all the publishers and all the code and all the data and everything we had done got, became ash once we got acquired. But I think it did teach me many valuable lessons, and I think it created the foundation for the design ethics work that took us to now.
So you get absorbed by Google. They put you on which team? Was it Gmail?
Yeah, they put us on the Chrome and apps team, which then, so we started working on some advanced like personal assistant type work. And then that led to working with the Gmail team. And I started I was working with the people who were designing the next version of Gmail. And, I found myself in the room with, the designers who manage this interface where people, you go to any internet cafe back before COVID, and you see almost every laptop has this like Gmail page open, right? Almost everywhere.
Oh yeah, we all know it. Sure.
We all know it. Like people live in this space. It's a habitat. It's not just a product we use. It's a space we live and we work in. And given that importance, I thought to myself, as we're designing the next version of this is an opportunity to really think about how this is an enormous source of stress in people's lives, It's funny because I think one of the responses to the film, when I say in the film that I'm really addicted to my email, a lot of people don't understand that because email is sort of just junk mail for a lot of people. But coming from, I think, the generation that you came from and that I came from, email is a central place where, especially at the time, every now and then I would be getting, big introductions to people who would help us advance the work. So it became my own slot machine to check, did Daniel Kahneman, the head of, the founder of behavioral economics, email me and that kind of thing. But that said, I was thinking about, is Gmail really good for people? I was thinking about, this is a pretty addictive, stressful place in people's lives. Could we reduce social expectations? Could you make it so that when you send an email, you could say, hey, I actually don't need a response for 2 weeks? Could we start to implement features that would reduce the addictiveness? And, there I am in the room, and there's no other room in the world besides that Gmail design team room. And if I thought if there was the room where it happened, and I thought if there was any room where people would care about this would be the one. And I found, to no disparagement of my colleagues who were working at the time, I just didn't find the conversation really as thoughtful as it needed to be, given the consequences that we were having for like 6 hours or 4 hours of people's days.
So first, how many people were in that room?
That's a good question. I think probably somewhere between 6 to 10 people usually in those rooms.
Okay. How long were you at Google before this discussion is happening?
So within about 3 months, we had joined the Gmail team and we're starting to have those conversations. So 3 to 4 months I was in there.
And then you sent out a now legendary deck around, hey, we should probably be thinking more deeply about the choices we're making because they're about to influence billions of people over time. Was that just months after you joined Google?
Yeah, that was in January of 1 year in. So it's basically 1 year into being at Google after trying to make it work with the Gmail team. I really wanted to see us ship something that would make a dramatic positive impact on people's mental health around email and stress and notifications and attention. And because it wasn't going anywhere, and because overall, like other apps, whether it was Quora or Path or all the, Instagram at the time, which was just, blowing up, I was just disappointed in where are we as a tech industry heading? Like where have we lost our moral compass? Do we really care about what we're building and how it's impacting people? Or have we kind of forgotten, that there's more to just capturing lots of attention and getting virality? And so I started, I went on a trip to the Santa Cruz Mountains with my one of my best friends, Asa Raskin, who his father, Jeff Raskin, invented the Macintosh project at Apple. And that's where we get our name in Humane for the Center for Humane Technology. Asa's father, Jeff, wrote a classic book called The Humane Interface, which is the foundation of some of our work. But Asa and I were in the Santa Cruz Mountains and, connecting with nature and just being out there. And it just really struck me that I needed to go back and there needed to be something that was said about this. And the words came to me in that trip, and it was never before in history have a handful of technology designers who mostly look like, hipster engineers in San Francisco between 25, 35 years old, mostly men, mostly white, making decisions on behalf of 1 billion people was the number at the time. Now it's 3 billion people, to show you the growth rate of how fast these things go. And the presentation included just a bunch of examples. You can actually find it online on minimizedistraction.com, I think is where someone had leaked it and posted it. But it used a bunch of examples of how technology's tapping into our psychological vulnerabilities and the cost that it was having on kids, on mental health. And it ended up going viral. I sent it to a few people for feedback. And instead of the 10 people I sent it to exclusively, I came to work the next day and I had like 100 emails about it. So I knew it had gone viral to many more people. And as the film, The Social Dilemma says, it went up to Larry Page's office in several different meetings that day. And I think it created a moment of reckoning where we actually said, hey, can we do something about this? And I would host follow-on lunches at Google, bringing people together from different teams to talk about it. But it was just hard to get a real coordinated action because the external global pressure from consumers or from the world or from governments just wasn't there. And that's what's astonishing is to see where it is now, because compared to, lunchroom meetings that I would book at a random part of the Google campus with, 12 people showing up saying, how do we fix this? To today, where you have, I think something like 30 to 40 million people are going to have seen this film very soon in 190 countries. It feels like it's taken 8 years to get to a point where we're going to be able to meaningfully change these incentives.
So this is 2012 that you send this deck out and then it goes viral at Google?
Yeah, 2012 to 2013, somewhere around there. End of 2012, early 2013.
All right, let's call it early 2013 then. So when you send this deck out to your 10 contacts, were you concerned at all that this is going to make you seem like someone who is not on board with like the like the general direction of development of the project you're on? I mean, you're relatively new to the company. It's an enormous company, and the rest of it. Like, is there any concern that this is going to be bad for your career?
Yeah. I'm glad you're bringing this up because it's easy to skim past this now. I actually had no idea how people were going to respond. I was prepared that if I had gotten fired for some reason because of it, that I would be okay with that. So I had pre-committed that was an okay thing, an okay outcome for me. And I was actually really afraid to send it out, which is why it surprised me when so many people, when it shared virally. I mean, on Google Slides, you can click on a presentation and it shows you in the top right-hand corner how many simultaneous viewers there are. And there was something like 150, and then later that day, like 400 simultaneous viewers, in a 10,000, whatever it was, 20,000 person company back then. So I did not expect to be, I'd never been in my life a person who went against the grain, who was highly disagreeable, who was trying to challenge things. I wasn't outspoken. It just struck me that no one was sufficiently paying attention to this, and it was too important not to.
So then it sounds like the feedback was by and large quite positive, so much so that they actually give you this new title and role saying, you're going to be our new design ethicist. You're going to tell us what's what. So how was that transition and role, and how long were you in that role?
Yeah, so this is important. There was a fellow at the Google Creative Lab in New York who had actually helped co-write, to make the story all circular. He helped co-write the first Macintosh, the famous Macintosh Super Bowl ad. If you remember the woman running down the streets and throwing the hammer and smashing the Big Brother screen, he had co-written that advertisement. And he had seen this presentation at Google and was really impressed by it. We connected on this book that had really shaped him by Neil Postman called Amusing Ourselves to Death, which is really, I think, entirely descriptive of exactly everything that's going wrong right now, that culture and our society would surrender to the forces of technology, and technology would start to subsume culture and remake culture in its image. And that we would be caught in this kind of race, not for attention, he didn't express it that way, but this race to make things amenable to how technology would want to see and shape the world. Metrics like, In this case, he was talking about SAT scores and predictive analytics for college admissions and things like that. But he didn't at the time know about, a few years later, we'd have tech companies running by the metrics of time spent and engagement. And that book, Amusing Ourselves to Death, opens with this description that we were all watching out for the year 1984, when the form of dystopia and tyranny in the form of Big Brother and the Orwellian vision of dystopia would come to, subsume society. And then luckily it didn't come to pass. We made it through 1984 and that didn't happen. But he says that there was always this second vision of dystopia that was the more subtle one that people don't remember as much, which is Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, where the tyranny is not of restricting access to information or censoring what you can or can't think, but instead bludgeoning people with a sea of irrelevance, with so much narcissism and egoism and passivity and informational overwhelm that people wouldn't know what's true, and they'd be amusing themselves to death. And this was the book that this fellow at Google, who offered to host me to work on this problem, and I connected on. And then I started to become, I didn't know what to call it, so we just said, let's call it design ethics. And no one had ever thought, how do you ethically design along the social psychological vulnerabilities of humanity? And it became more of a research project for the first 2 years. And I tried changing various things within Google. We tried talking to the Android team and changing things on Chrome and how would we make smartphones work differently, and talk to the App Store teams about changing incentives. But I couldn't get anywhere. And so about 3 years later, I decided to leave. And soon after that, I was on the Sam Harris podcast, where you and I think, both launched our careers in a certain sense. And you
Sam
and I
Harris, thank you.
Thanks to Sam. That podcast was the kind of coming out moment for this work. And Chris Anderson, who runs TED, emailed me a few days later, which was, I think, only 3 days before the TED conference, and said, I need to get you to come to TED to do a TED talk on what you just shared on Sam's podcast. And I was actually about to fly to Czech Republic with my mother, who was dying at the time. And this was the last time that we were going to take a trip abroad. And I decided to go, but then cut my trip short, go to TED, had 2 days to prepare this first TED talk on how technology controls a billion minds. And that's where I met you. And I remember the moment it happened at the buffet table, I think on that Friday. Yeah, that was, it's a long time ago now.
Well, I did not know what the run up was too. For me, I was just blown away by your talk and was like, that was incredible. It's like, so hearing, I didn't know about Sam, and certainly not, you're abbreviating your trip with your mom. So when you decide to leave Google, here's the thing. Google, famous for its food, famous for all this stuff. You're hanging out there. You've got this design ethicist job, and you're like, hey, Android, try and do something better. Hey, like everyone, try and do something better. And you realize you're not making headway. I still feel like 99% of people would have been like, just stay there forever, do your thing, because you're in like corporate womb. Like, people respect you. You were still in the mothership. So it feels like a big decision to be like, all right, this is not working. It's time for me to go. Particularly when you decided to leave, it didn't seem like it was clear what the next steps would be.
It's so interesting, Andrew. I really appreciate you asking these questions. That's exactly right. I did not at all feel clear. Leave and go do what? Like, how you're inside of the biggest, most influential company in the world. That is probably one of the biggest surface areas for these problems showing up, which is all of Android, which actually has a majority of smartphone users around the world. In the US, obviously, it's more iPhone skewed. Why in the world would you leave that environment and obviously be paid? I think Nicholas Nassim Taleb wrote the line that the three most addictive things in the world are cocaine, heroin, and a monthly paycheck. It's very hard to walk away from, monthly security, job security. And I really didn't know how we would ever change these problems. I remember feeling deep anxiety about what it would mean to leave and live off my savings, frankly, and figure out how in the world, what do you do to sort of get people to care about something in a public stage? And there was about a year and a half after that where nothing happened. And it was when I think Trump got elected and the election took place and the conversation started happening about Russian manipulation of the elections, and I had seen certain things like this myself and had been part of a community of researchers who'd been tracking some of those manipulations, that I decided I had to jump in full steam into this problem, even if I didn't know how I would get the attention it deserved. And the real big breakthrough there was the 60 Minutes piece in 2017 called The Addiction Code with Anderson Cooper. And that was the first, I think, major event where insiders from the tech industry were speaking out about it. And that's what led to Sam Harris. And that's what I think helped accelerate this conversation. It was Roger McNamee, who wrote the book Zucked, and I did an interview. He was actually the person on Bloomberg hosting. If you don't know, Roger McNamee wrote the book Zucked. He was an early investor in Facebook.
Roger is very, very smart, and I admired that book and his work.
Yeah, and he was an early mentor to Mark Zuckerberg in the early days. He actually was brought in, as the opening chapter of the book Zucked says, to sort of convince Mark not to sell the company to, I think it was either Microsoft or Yahoo, and to instead that he had one of the biggest companies in the world on his hands. And so anyway, so Roger felt very similarly, but he was sitting there on the sidelines and hosting this show on Bloomberg TV. And after 60 Minutes, I went on the show and he called me afterwards and said, "Do you need a wingman?" And we set out to try to figure out, how do we start this conversation? And we were at TED together trying to figure out, could we build allies? And honestly, we had almost no one listening or paying attention. People were not really engaged. And it's taken just so long to get the kind of public conversation to match it now.
Yeah, they're paying attention now. So there's Sam Harris, TED. I feel like there was a steady drumbeat of news and awareness. Jaron Lanier is part of this, I believe.
Absolutely.
But I will say that when you sent me a message saying, "Hey, great news, Netflix documentary, Social Dilemma," like it was still like a pretty big surprise to me. And I know these movies take a while. Yeah. So how the heck did the resources behind the Social Dilemma come about? I feel like there must be some heroic filmmaker we owe a debt to.
Absolutely. So I just want to say also, I was just a primary subject in the film. We didn't produce the film. I'm not making money from the film. A lot of people think, they accuse this of, I don't even know, trying to make money off of talking about the problem, and this couldn't be farther from the truth. But so the film was in the works for about 3 years, starting in 2017. In fact, many of the interviews that are of me in the film were recorded in early 2018, late 2017, I think. So, and they bear relevance to now. And I think it speaks to just how consistently these issues were going to appear in society. The filmmaker, Jeff Orlowski, was actually at Stanford during the same years that I was there. We were both Apple campus representatives, believe it or not. And he had made 2 award-winning climate change films, one called Chasing Ice and another called Chasing Coral, about the disappearance of coral and the glaciers up in the northern parts of the world. And we saw this as kind of a climate change of culture piece. He didn't really know about these problems. He'd been following some of my work, having risen up in 2017. And we started talking about it. We had met the producers, Laurie David and Heather Reisman, who we owe just incredible gratitude to through Ariana Huffington, so who we also owe incredible gratitude to. And this film got off the ground. And it took, like we said, about 3 years for it to come out till now. And, it was really important for us to have it come out before this election, because I think it's possibly most consequential for our democracy. And we talk about a lot of harms, mental health of kids, talk about addiction, but I really think it's the breakdown of our shared information ecology and our ability to trust in shared sources of information and to walk away from, a debate and see the same movie as opposed to different movies. I think this is the most existential aspect that the film really gets at, is our shared reality is being torn apart like a paper shredder into 3 billion narrower and narrower auto-programmed Truman shows, where they are programmed to give us a more affirmation that you're right, the other side is wrong, and here's even more evidence of whichever you believe about controversial, polarizing topics. And when you do that and you run that psychology, I think of it like an optometrist who puts this pair of glasses on your eyes. And they put those glasses on us 10 years ago because we started looking out through the glasses of Facebook to see what is the world, what's really going on out there. And we've been wearing these, instead of far-sighted or nearsighted glasses, we've been wearing these outrage-sighted glasses for about 10 years now. And again, not just Facebook, but the kind of Twitter, outrage machine, the YouTube outrage machine. And so we're 10 years into this deep psychology experiment that has become the new normal. And so it's not just about let's fix the platforms now. Let's also, what I hope the film does, is kind of rewind the clock and say, imagine if you wore this hypothetical outrage colored glasses. So you walk into your kitchen and wherever you look, it shows you something you could be outraged at. Like your spouse left the dishes in the sink and it highlights those. What's that?
My coffee can wasn't there.
Exactly.
I'm
Your
really
coffee
mad
can is
about
not
it.
there and it's not even in the place you usually leave it. The dishes are out. It shows you who left the dishes out. When you look on the refrigerator handle, you see that someone sneezed on it because the glasses highlight the green, microparticles of germs or something. So imagine you were wearing outrage colored glasses everywhere you looked. And imagine you were wearing those glasses for 10 years. How would you feel and think and act and navigate in the world if that was the construction and basis of your reality? And that's exactly what we've had with, I think, these social media platforms. Again, no one at Twitter, we both know Jack, I think intended for any of this to happen. It's just that this became this business model. And once the companies go public, they're forced to be on this treadmill of keeping growth going. And growth is directly connected to time spent and engagement.
Yeah, Jaron Lanier, when we talked, he said, well, we looked up and said, seems like advertising is like the best business model we could think of. But then taken to a multi-billion-dollar extreme, it ends up having very the negative incentives attached, because it's like, okay, now I got to gin up engagement. And how am I going to gin up engagement? By making you outraged at something or afraid or eager to blame someone else. So I agree with your description of the problem, the magnitude of it. Simultaneously to this run up between 17 and 2020, you also co-founded an organization, the Center for Humane Technology, that's trying to make people more mindful. Can you talk a little bit about what the center's goals are?
Yeah. So the Center for Humane Technology.
And there's also time well spent. I don't know which one you want to go into.
Well, yeah. So the original work was under the spotlight of an advocacy group called Time Well Spent, and the idea behind this was from a continuity of the first TED Talk that I gave in 2013 or something like that, which was about the idea that we live in a time spent economy, that things are competing for your time, and you can always get more money, but you can't get more time. So time is the finite resource that we all share, and it's the ultimate neutral, flat leveling playing field that we all have to operate on. And if you have companies competing for that, you're going to end up with these problems. And we said the answer is, imagine a world where technology competes to help us spend time well, and they're competing on the basis of that finite resource to direct it in the places that we would say align with our own values. That work was important and became, the first stage of all of this, but it didn't capture the vast, polarizing conspiracy theories, other kinds of effects that were really at the heart of this. And we needed a new instantiation and frankly, a real funded nonprofit vehicle to do this work. So Roger McNamee, Randy Fernando, Asa Raskin, my co-founders of the Center for Humane Technology, put together this group, and we actually partnered with Common Sense Media at the beginning. And Common Sense Media, for those who don't know, is an advocacy organization who focuses on the issues of kids and screen time and privacy-related issues. And we really partnered up to do advocacy in California state legislature. We did a conference in DC called the Truth About Tech Conference. And we've done a bunch of media and started making noise about these problems. And since then, the center is really focused on realigning technology's incentives with humanity's best interests. Simply put, because the fundamental incentives of these large dominant platforms are directly profiting from conspiracy theories, polarization, breakdown of mental health. The more addicted your kids are, the more anxious they are. Not that, again, anyone wants this to happen. The line in the film that I think describes it best, that Justin Rosenstein says, who invented the like button, is so long as a whale is worth more dead than alive, and a tree is worth more as lumber than as a tree, and we don't regulate private forests or protect state forests. Now we're the whale, we're the tree, we're the resource that is being strip mined into our cognition, and that means that we're worth more if we're addicted, distracted, outraged, narcissistic, attention-seeking, polarized, and disinformed than if we're a thriving citizen or a healthy, growing child who's, living their lives in the way that we want. And I think this speaks to some of your work, Andrew, because it's about dignity. It's about, are we the product where we're just a cog in the economy, or do we fundamentally have dignity? And can we have a system that treats each of us with a kind of sacred dignity that it should work that way?
Yeah, it's about, do we work for the economy or does the economy work for us? Are we worth more outrage than calm? It's like, well, maybe I'd still prefer to be calm, even if I'm worth more outraged. We have to see to it that we're not all just instruments of profit and revenue maximization, because it turns out maximizing our profitability is really bad for us. It means that we're very, very pissed off and ready to click and act and watch whatever videos you want to serve to us at any moment in time. One thing about this pandemic is trying to feel good and take care of yourself. It's not easy. Zach, you're on a health kick that lasted about a month, and then he's been struggling ever since.
Yeah, 3.5 weeks.
But one thing that you can commit to doing that will help you feel better and be healthier is athletic greens. Over the course of my life, I have put a lot of different mixes and shakes into my body, and athletic greens truly makes a difference in a way that the other ones have not. You imbibe it, and it actually feels like you're helping yourself. And the science bears it out. The nutrition bears it out. It's like a super multivitamin. And if you want to boost your immune system, feel like you're treating your body well in a way that's actually sustainable for just about anyone, Athletic Greens is for you. So make an investment in your health today. Try the ultimate all-in-one wellness bundle. Support your immunity, get health and energy by visiting athleticgreens.com/yang. You'll receive up to a year's supply of liquid vitamin D for free with your first purchase in case you're not getting enough sun.
Check it out, athleticgreens.com/yang.
It's great to give people this sense of what it took to get to this moment, the social dilemma, the fact that now, in large part because of you individually and all the people that have helped you in your work, that the awareness about the nature of these problems is now higher than it's ever been. And if you look at polling around big tech has gone from can do no wrong to whoa, like there's some real problems and excesses that we're going to have to figure out and get to the bottom of. You can see that with the recent antitrust hearings and the rest of it, which is one angle. To me, that's like fine, but it's missing some of the fundamental problems. It's like, like pretending these tech companies are, oil companies or steel companies or whatever. It's like not really doing the trick. So this is the big thing I want to pick your brain on. So full disclosure, because this might entertain you. I would say things on the trail like, hey, quoting you, sometimes I attributed, sometimes I didn't. I knew you wouldn't care. But I would say, we have some of the smartest engineers in the country turning supercomputers into dopamine delivery devices for our kids, and it's having a disastrous effect on our mental health, teenage girls in particular, according to Jonathan Haidt and Gene Twangy's data. And then every parent in Iowa, New Hampshire who heard this were like, yeah, because they see their kids getting addicted to their screens, and it's not great for their development. And then they would turn to me and say, what are we going to do about it? And then I would say, you know what we're going to do? and here's where, I don't know if you said this, I said, as your president, I'm going to start a Department of the Attention Economy, and I'm going to have my friend Tristan Harris run it. Tristan has been trying to change the design decisions of these tech companies for years. Now, most of them, just gave like, Andrew knows someone specifically who has the right thinking on this. But if we were to play that scenario out, what do we need to do to try and humanize our technology and our use of it?
First, I just want to say a few things to what you shared. Man, yeah. Well, I just want to say I appreciated so much that you like with universal basic income and like with other aspects of your platform, you, I think, have always prioritized a kind of public education in your work, in trying to help people understand and elevate issues that are not being talked about, and using your presidential campaign to do that. I think that was amazing. You did that with UBI, and you've also been doing that with the attention economy. And I think you helped make it even a bigger issue. And I just really want to say I really appreciated that you led the way on elevating it as I think to its rightful position as one of the top issues facing society, because it's underneath and exacerbating all the other issues.
It makes it impossible to solve any problems if we can't even agree on reality.
Exactly. And that's what we say in the film so clearly, is if we can't agree on reality, we can't solve any problem, whether it's climate change, poverty, or social justice and racism, or whatever we want to deal with. So, truth be told, this is not an easy thing to regulate. It has to do with core business models. I do think we can look to ways that the climate movement thinks about an increasing over time tax to carbon, to carbon externalities, setting a price on carbon. So essentially, as we've talked about, this is an extractive economy where instead of extracting oil out of the ground and then producing, climate change at a global level in the commons, depleting the environmental commons and also eroding the life support systems of the planet, that's the fossil fuel economy. In this case, we have an extractive economy built on not just extracting human attention, but as we talked about in an earlier interview we did, fracking for human attention, because we're worth more also when we're multitasking. It's really quickly on that, we're worth more when you have a tablet, a phone, and your television up. And that triples the size of the attention economy, because now you're paying attention to three things. So,
dark.
But one thing that very much like that, when you use the metaphor of fracking for attention, you start to see that we're selling, just like the financial crisis, thinner and thinner slices of human attention, as if it's worth the same as valuable concentrated attention, but it's kind of junk attention, just like we're selling thinner and thinner credit default swap type, junk instruments, financial instruments, and selling it as if it's this bigger thing, and propping up this kind of inflated advertising attention market. So I think one thing we can do is we can correct for that inflation. I think there's one study from a couple years ago where Facebook was found to inflate the amount of advertising reporting that it did for their advertisers by 900%, meaning they exaggerated how much the viewership or clicks there was by 900%. So that's just like, a financial broker exaggerating the value of, a financial instrument by a lot. So we can kind of clean up comprehensively this systemically fragile, fragility creating system. So much like you can't just say we're going to get completely off of oil in 1 year and carbon prices are going to be set to $1 million a ton and we're going to move over. You set up a transition plan over 10 years. So I think what we need is a transition plan from each company maximizing how much attention that they kind of extract to winding down how much commodification of human attention that we can do over time. One model of this actually comes from the way that we regulate energy companies, because it used to be that PG&E or Con Edison or whatever your energy company is, they're a for-profit company. Theoretically, they want you to use as much energy as possible. So leave the lights on, leave the faucets on, maximize your just wasting of energy, and you're maximizing climate pollution, activity and behavior. They can even put those nests in your home and then maximize how much you use to manipulate you into using the most. That would be a kind of dystopian reality.
Our recommended home temperature is 95 degrees.
Exactly. And get you to change it all the time. And, anyway, so obviously that would be an extractive kind of business, and it's fundamentally misaligned with the commons because it accelerates climate change, et cetera. So we've dealt with this problem before. We actually have regulated utilities that set seasonal targets for how much money you can make as a utility off of a certain amount of energy. So for example, if there's a seasonal availability of so much energy, it costs this much for this lower tiered usage. And then if you're a consumer and you use, let's say, beyond that amount, because it's a hot summer, they actually double charge you for that next phase of energy that you're using, except those extra profits don't go into the coffers of PG&E or Con Edison. They go into a public fund that actually invests in the renewable energy infrastructure that we need. So that's a nice, I don't know if you caught that,
Wow.
but it's a sort of a nice transition plan of,
I caught that.
yeah. I don't know how I explain these things very well. You probably know these things better than I do, frankly, but
No. So let me just try and walk through this just for fun. So let's say you and I are getting together and we're part of the Department of the Attention Economy, and we're like, all right, hey Facebook, here's the deal. We find you excessively extractive in terms of the amount of attention you're getting from folks. So step number one, stop exaggerating the amount of time we actually spend on you. That's number one. But number two, for every bit of attention you get beyond a certain period, let's call it like hour 4+ for a teenager. Like there's actually like some negative social value associated with that. So we're going to have you pay a penalty, and then use that penalty then to fund some alternatives. Let's call it like little leagues or whatever. Like we fund something that would be like the anti Facebook type of countermeasure. Is that more or less accurate?
well, I also want to say this is a tiny part of probably a more comprehensive way of dealing with these problems. But I think there's a part of it, which is that we have to remove some of the perverse incentives.
Yes.
What you're saying now reminds me of something I said when I went to the whatever you say, pronounce it, advertising festival, where, we were talking to the advertisers that fund all this activity and these mental health harms, and said, after there's a mental health crisis from kids and there's a loneliness crisis, someone's gonna ask the question, who paid for all of this to happen? And it's obviously these advertisers. And one of the things we proposed was, imagine you just simply cannot make money from usage between, let's say, midnight and 6 a.m. if you're a tech company. That disincentivizes usage of sort of late night lonely use. That's sort of the low willpower period of use. Now that's definitely
I don't know what you're talking about, Tristan. I have never done any low willpower tech social media use between those hours.
I think you are the superhuman willpower one among us that is resistant.
Kidding. We've all done it. But I love that idea so much, where you cordon off a number of hours where you're like, look, extracting attention in these hours is not a good thing.
It's like treating a park, those trees. Some of the trees we extract and we turn into lumber. Other trees we say this is part of a national park and they're for walking and exploring and enjoying, right? And it's like some of our attention can be maybe, part of a system that obviously wants to commoditize it. But that's another thing, is there's sort of a violation of turning alive humanness and alive human choice into these dead slabs of human behavior through behavior modification engines, right? So we turn like alive consciousness into this sort of deadened consciousness in which your behavior is more or less predictable, because we've taken what could be a free choice and turned it into an unconscious habit, which is a form of kind of like dead lumber is to a tree what dead human behavior is to a live human being. There's many different aspects of this that I think we have to correct. I think what we need here is overall something more comprehensive. Just like with the financial crisis, if you asked me, Andrew, and said, what's the one law that we pass that's going to fix all this? I like your approach that this is sort of an ongoing issue and that we need a cabinet level Department of the Attention Economy to deal with these problems.
Oh, let's dig into the toolkit a little bit more, because I'm already learning a ton from you. So I love seeing it as something of a negative externality, like attention beyond a certain point, where you say, look, like I was thinking beyond hour X is probably not a great thing for you. I love your saying, look, between midnight and 6 a.m., probably terrible for teenagers to be Facebooking it up or whatnot. Like, just throw a few things out there like that also belong somewhere in like the consideration set or toolkit.
Yeah, we're going to be publishing some more on this on our website soon. I have some of it up here right now, but I think a more comprehensive approach is something like what we had for the financial crisis, where we had a comprehensively risk-creating system, and we needed comprehensive Basel III reforms in Europe, or the Dodd-Frank kind of reforms in the United States. I know there's some problems with that, but that's thematically what we would want to be going after. So we need protection for kids, privacy for people, transparency for platforms. You could imagine you get Section 230 protections for content, but not for amplification or recommendation systems. And in exchange for getting Section 230 protections, for those who don't know, it's what enables platforms to not be liable for bad content on their platforms. But in exchange for that, there has to be transparency to the public and to many civil society groups to be able to say which things we want to measure about the use or prevalence of certain kinds of content, so that we can actually do a better job of regulating them, because we don't even have transparency now about how bad is the teenage mental health problem. How many users beneath the age of 16 are using it between 2 and 4 in the morning? If we had transparency, we could actually make them report not to a board of directors, but to a board of the people based on these metrics that matter to us in a democratically governed society.
Oh, that is enormous. So modifying Section 230 in those ways would be huge, because in many ways, that is these companies' license to operate and print money, really.
That's right.
And this was written in '96, before any of these companies even existed. Like, we couldn't.
So I'm sure they anticipated YouTube and Facebook and TikTok, many years later.
So we need to examine this license, essentially. And what you're suggesting is a difference between posting content and then spreading advertising content or messages or videos that there's some kind of commercial incentive attached to. So that's a very interesting distinction. The other interesting thing you're attaching to it is to say, look, we're going to give you this, and in some cases, this franchise is worth billions, even trillions of dollars. But in return, we get data. They get real data about what the actual public harms are. Because if you compare this to a negative externality, where you look at, for example, with pollution, you look around and say, okay, there are negative effects through climate change. In this one, we actually need the data the social media companies have in order to measure a lot of the harms.
That's right. And so this is table stakes. This is not the thing that answers the problems. This is the sort of prerequisite for being able to do anything. A metaphor I often have, Andrew, since you're using these climate change analogies, is it's like Facebook is like Exxon, but they're the Exxon of human anxiety. Except they also don't just own the kind of extraction of oil. They also own the entire satellite network that we have to observe and measure how much CO2 and methane. So they actually control the measurement of how bad the problem is. So this is ridiculous. It's almost like if you take the monopoly conversation, it's a vertically integrated company that owns both the measurement, either the exclusive access to measurement of the harm and also the harm creation. That's a vertically integrated, perverse sort of company. There's also other aspects: freedom from manipulation, accountability for harms, enabling more competition. We can dig into that, because it's less about, as you said, magically breaking them up causes the removal of misinformation or addiction in society, because you still have a race to the bottom to create those problems. And then also national security, because we haven't talked about that. That, while we've been obsessed, by some folks and politicians of protecting our physical borders, we've been leaving our digital borders wide open. And this is really important, because if Russia or China try to fly a plane into the physical United States, or they try to get across the passport controls, we have huge billions of dollars invested in either shooting down that plane or stopping them at the border. But
none of us would accept it. None of us would accept the fact that you have 70 countries right now that are investing in misinformation, and everyone's like, if you had 70 countries flying planes through our airspace, we'd all be like, what the heck is going on?
That's exactly right. And so if you think about it as how much of the surface area of our country's activity happens in the physical world, and how much of that surface area is moving into the virtual world of kind of Facebook, Instagram, clicks, advertising, email, etc. And more of our economic activity is moving from the physical to the digital, but we don't protect the digital borders. So if Russia and China try to fly an information plane into the virtual United States, instead of being met by the Pentagon to shoot it down, they're met by a Facebook algorithm with a white glove that says, yeah, exactly which zip code or minority group would you like to target with more divisive information that could stir up culture wars. So this is a urgent national security threat that we've been meaning to try to get more into the agenda, because I think we massively underestimate the vulnerability of culture. After World War II, big powers like Russia, China, Iran, Turkey, they're not going to, attack the United States with nuclear weapons anymore. They can't do kinetic warfare. And so what would you do? You would actually want to take the divisions in a country that already exist, walk over their virtual borders, and stir up culture wars and racial divides everywhere, which is exactly what we're seeing them doing. We also know that Russia has gone after ex-U.S. veteran groups and trying to sow more discontent about, the military.
Oh, it's so dark.
We know that
So
we know that
despicable.
Russia is going after environmentalist groups. In fact, they actually go after pro-environmentalist, anti-fracking U.S. advocates like Greenpeace and amplify them, because what happens if in the U.S. we don't frack? We have to buy more foreign oil from where? From Russia. So
Russia.
there's many different aspects to this problem, but I think what people need to know is that this is in all of our interests. It's not a partisan issue. It's really a global issue and a national security issue that affects everyone.
So Tristan, if hypothetically I am part of the administration and I call you and say, hey, do you want to join the newly christened Department of the Attention Economy and clean this stuff up? Like, are you game? Are we going to do this thing?
If we can make that happen and there's a real opportunity in the next administration, I think I would have to strongly consider doing that.
Well, Tristan, you're a blessing to us all. The fact that you've been fighting this fight sometimes in relative pain and obscurity. And now this is a moment when everyone can look at you and say, he's been onto something this whole time. Just like your old colleagues at Google who are like, hey, I didn't see it, but now I see it. We all see it now, which is the first big step towards solving a problem, is acknowledging its existence. And now we have to solve it as quickly as possible because time is not on our side. And this stuff's getting nastier, more virulent. It's going to make it impossible for us this is the problem that if you don't solve it, you can't solve anything else.
That's right. But I do think the thing that gives me hope, Andrew, is that, what's been missing is the collective will of the people and public pressure. And I wish I could show the world my inbox, because I didn't even have an Instagram account that I hadn't used since 2012. And now suddenly I went from, no followers or whatever to something like 50,000. I get messages from all around the world from people saying, I'm ready to do everything I can. This is too important. Everyone wants to solve this problem. So I probably feel like you did, where you're just getting messages from people around the country saying, we got to solve it. And I know that's not enough. We have to actually translate it into meaningful action and political energy. But I think that the difference between this and climate change is, unlike seeing the movie Inconvenient Truth and then saying, well, this is going to happen to my grandkids. If this is the climate change of culture and it's sort of a disaster for our social fabric, after seeing the movie, you turn to that glass slab in your pocket and you stare at it 80 more times that day. And you know that it's causing these problems. So I think that this really is the issue we can all unite around. And that gives me an incredible hope. And I think, as you said, awareness precedes the opportunity for choice. I think the question everyone can ask themselves is, instead of my attention being the commodity, we can also ask what is worth our attention individually, and also what is worth our attention as a country, because I think the current attention economy does not reflect what really matters to us.
None of us would choose this, that's for sure, Tristan. And we're going to have to actually decide what to choose if we give ourselves that chance. So pumped to reconnect with you. Congratulations on your organization and movement and documentary getting to this point. And I'm thrilled to work with you because we got to solve these problems. One thing I do get those messages, and I appreciate the Yang Gang and the love so much. We should maybe give a name for your gang.
We do need one, actually. I don't know if it's the Humane Gang.
Yeah, Humane Gang of Humans, whatever it is. But the challenge now, just to give you like at least my sense of things, is what you just said is like, look, you're the people, then you have this political energy, and then you have a political system that is not exactly super high functioning. and that's the thing. And then you have, in your case, you have these $650 billion companies, or, multi-billion dollar companies who are like the biggest, richest. They're like almost countries unto themselves. And when they look up and see our national government, they do not think to themselves like, these people know what's best for me and my business. Like I should really listen to them. It's more like, so this is like, the popular energy is an enormous first step, but activating our political machinery to actually like make these changes and bring some of these companies to the table. Popular zeal will help because a lot of the folks work at these companies like you did. A lot of the folks obviously, like have kids themselves or use the services. But yeah, like the real fight is coming.
Yeah. Well, I think we actually have a lot of lessons to learn from probably people who used to formerly work for you, because we do need to build a movement on the back of I think what the film is creating. I think there's so much energy to change, but we have to channel it in the appropriate directions. And I know there's some things coming up locally in California, the Consumer Privacy Act, Consumer Privacy Reform Rights Act, excuse me, and some more action in Europe. But I want to encourage people to really get involved, to educate yourself. We do have more resources on humanetech.com. But honestly, Andrew, I'd love to learn more as well about how do we activate a movement around this, because it is how we see it. I think we have to organize a constituency that this is the issue that's beneath other issues.
Well, you and I are going to connect. I'm going to text you, and I want to be a resource to you in any way I can. If someone does want to get energized around your movement, is humanetech.com the best place to go?
Yeah, the best place to go is humanetech.com. For those who want to know just how do they take control of the things and the effects that they saw in the film, there's a take control page. We also have a great podcast called Your Undivided Attention, where we interview many of the people who are in the film The Social Dilemma, but go in depth on YouTube recommendations, go in depth on Russian disinformation, go in depth on the casino-like slot machine design of social media. And that's a good place to educate yourself. And we're really working now on kind of mobilization. So how do we build those catchment systems that mobilize people? And I would, frankly, Andrew, I would really love to follow up with you about how you did that and who we could leverage from your movement to help us. Because I think we can really get a large constituency that's also bipartisan too.
Done and done. We are at your disposal. Let's give it up for Tristan Harris. Tristan, thank you so much, brother.
It's such a pleasure to be here, Andrew. I really, really appreciate what you've done. And I'm really excited to follow up. I really think this is so important. So thank you so much for having me on.
Me too. Thank you for listening in. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you did, please do subscribe to Yang Speaks and click on notifications so we can let you know every time we have a new episode.